When we consume something, we take it out of the world and incorporate it into our own being. That's what we do with food. But why do we use that word when talking about art and media? You don't erase a movie from existence by watching it. So why do we say we consume media? I think we say this to emphasize the fact that after we consume something, it's processed through us and we're no longer thinking about it, or we'd rather not think about it. But the similarities between eating and entertainment don't end there. Just like with food, the kinds of art, media, things you consume can have a potent effect on your lifestyle, whether you recognize it or not. And just like our food diets, I believe we owe it to ourselves to balance our media diets. Let's say you're trying to get into something new. Maybe your friends have been bugging you to watch something so you can all yap about it together. Or perhaps you took a wrong turn at Albuquerque and got lost in a mythical library that has every tome that ever was and will be written. Where do you even start? You might be thinking that beginnings are where people start. But we don't start at a place because it's the beginning. A place is the beginning because we start there. But chronology has seldom led us astray, am I right? You want to get into poetry? Why don't you start with the Epic of Gilgamesh and work your way up from there? But you should probably start soon, because there's like a lot to catch up on. Jokes aside, there's no objective starting point for any genre of thing, and there's no need to adhere to a strict chronological order. In the case of media, where there will quite literally always be more than we can possibly consume, to work our way up from the beginning would be impractical and frankly ridiculous. We need to start somewhere, so just pick something that catches your eye and start there. The time you spend deliberating on the perfect place to start could be spent consuming something. And more than likely, you'll get something out of whatever it is you choose. After all, you don't need to relearn how to eat every time you try a new kind of food, and you don't need to relearn how to read every time you try a new genre of book. Or do you? Not too long ago, I wanted to get into philosophy. Existentialism in particular piqued my interest, and so naturally the first book I sought to read was Soren Kierkegaard's Fear and Trembling. It was like a juicy cut of wagyu that I skipped lunch to make room for. I got about 4/7 of the way through before I had to put it down. I like to think that I have a decent grasp on the English language, but it should go without saying that just because I can understand English doesn't mean I can understand everything that is being said in English. I ended up just watching videos of people explaining Kierkegaard's arguments in layman's terms. I thought my resignation was infinite, but alas. Where did I go wrong? Was it that I skipped to reading a notoriously esoteric author like Kierkegaard instead of starting with Existentialism for Dummies? Well, yeah. I was unfamiliar with the world of philosophical writing. I found myself choking on jargon and complex sentence structures. Despite me knowing, or rather being convinced, that Fear and Trembling is a worthwhile read, I got very little out of actually reading it. I couldn't appreciate it because I lacked the skill set to appropriately interact with it. In a sentence, I bit off more than I could chew. You know, there are actually a lot of English phrases relating to food, like how to chew on something is to ponder on it, and when something is tough to swallow, it's difficult to understand or accept. And if I never learned how to chew, how could I expect myself to swallow something without choking? In our indefatigable pursuit of more and more media to consume, we often utilize heuristics to help us decide what to consume next, typically defaulting to good first and less good later, if at all. Why do you think streaming platforms accompany movies with their star rating? They're there to assist in the decision making process by efficiently telling us how good the movie is. But it's partly because of this that our media diets have become unbalanced. How can we appreciate the good stuff if that's all we ever consume? Occasionally, when I see a package of ground meat that's on sale at the grocery store, I'll cook myself a hamburger. But this hamburger is no ordinary hamburger. It's worse. It's usually either burnt or undercooked, or the ratio of meat to other toppings is out of whack, or I'll put entirely too much hot sauce on it. It's certainly not anywhere near the best burger, but I still usually enjoy the taste. No matter how much juicy, professionally cooked steak I eat, I will eventually come to crave my freaky deaky home cooked hamburger once again. Similarly, no matter how many critically acclaimed stories I read, like Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray or H.P. Lovecraft's The Rats in the Walls, I'll still occasionally want to read something like F. Gardner's Call of the Crocodile. It's stories like Call of the Crocodile that help us understand what makes stories like Dorian Gray or The Rats in the Walls good, showing us how appropriate handling of foreshadowing, pacing, subtlety, and symbolism, or lack thereof, can make stories more enjoyable in the traditional sense. When you become obsessed with only pursuing quality, not only do you become snobbish and annoying, but you also risk devaluing and or delegitimizing the art that you place below your standards. If you keep eating better and better food, where does it stop? You are literally chasing the dragon. Eventually the food that you once considered amazing is now normal, and what was once normal is now shit. This is textbook power creep. In Dragon Ball, our beloved main character Goku gets stronger to match his opponent. Then the next opponent is stronger than them, so he has to get stronger again, and rinse and repeat. As the stakes rise higher and higher, we ironically become less invested because we can't relate to the story anymore. My point is, we risk losing the plot when we endlessly search for the next best thing. We desperately need a palate cleanser. We need a return to simpler times. We need Goku to be turned back into a kid so he can have more misadventures. That's right, we need to watch Dragon Ball GT. This is not a joke. Anyway, what I mean to say is, the hamburger is what contextualizes the steak. But how can we know which things are hamburgers and which things are steaks? I think it's time to pull back the curtain. There is no steak, there is no hamburger, and there is no Queen of England. What do words like good or less good or bad even mean when talking about the overall quality of things? Imagine, if you will, you had only watched one movie in your whole life. It could be the best or worst movie of all time, and you'd have absolutely no way of knowing. This is because the quality of things is relative. But things can't be separated into just the good or the bad. This is ugly erasure. Unlike food, which has measurable physical benefits, the benefits of art, or things as I've been so eloquently and specifically referring to, aren't physical. The quality of things is more fluid than anything else in the world. As art forms develop, techniques and conventions are cultivated, and naturally, as we as a species love comparing apples to oranges, we use these conventions as metrics in determining quality. This is not to say that art quality is imaginary, but rather that quality is a social construct. Art does not have intrinsic meaning. We are what gives art meaning. So if it's not the quality of the thing that should motivate us to consume it, what else would it be? The fastidious viewer would know that I've already said it. It's the taste, the flavor, not the quality, but the qualities of it. Whether it's a refined execution of a particularly artistic technique, a fresh take on a beloved classic, or unadulterated enjoyment that you can't seem to put into words, there needs to be something for you to absorb or digest. That's why we don't read novels in languages we don't understand, because we can't absorb anything from them. We haven't learned to chew on those things yet. One of my all-time favorite movies is The Adventures of Shark Boy and Lava Girl. I don't love it ironically, I love it genuinely. It's a silly kids movie with cheesy CGI and amateurish acting. But it's also a story about a young kid coping with bullying and his uncomfortable home situation through escapism. But it's also a cautionary tale targeted at the parents that are forced to watch it with their kids about the misattribution and mishandling of child mental illness. If you told me that I was reading too much into it, I tell you that you're not reading into it enough. There are very few things that we cannot digest or draw meaning from, supposing that we're open to it. Okay, so should we just consume things willy-nilly, since there's no good nor bad, and we can learn from anything? Well, no, you dipshit. I'm not done talking. Sorry, you're not a dipshit. Given the sheer volume of things and the limits of our free time, it's natural that we would gravitate toward the things that we believe are the most likely to be worth our time. However, as I illustrated with the albeit extreme Kierkegaard example, this may not always be the best course of action. Herein lies an irony. In our pursuit of the most efficient use of our time, we might actually end up being less efficient by consuming things that we're not adequately equipped to handle. Not to mention the misguided principle of multitasking in media consumption, which just dilutes our focus and robs us of fully absorbing each of the things we're trying to consume at once. Supposing that we're actually trying to absorb something, efficiency should not be our central concern with regard to media consumption. But I digress. Earlier, we established a few places where you shouldn't start. So, where shouldn't you not start then? The remaining option is to start somewhere in the middle. If you start at the top with what might be considered the best or perhaps the most sophisticated thing, you might end up confused and disappointed. If you were to start at the bottom, however, it would likely just be unenjoyable and off putting. I can't really think of why anyone would want to start with the absolute worst thing when getting into something new. And if you do, I can't imagine that you'd have any interest in what I have to say anyway. The point is to be deliberate in avoiding the extremes on the commonly accepted quality scale until you feel more familiar with that genre of thing. That being said, I'm not trying to impose some sort of rule about only consuming things that you can pick apart surgically. That would be elitist and exclusionary, and go against what I've been trying to say this whole time about how you can absorb valuable knowledge from most things, not just the best things. And we need those most things so that we can appreciate those best things. It's like what this one obscure indie band said one time. How can you have any pudding if you don't eat your meat? How are we supposed to know what these endgame dessert likes are anyway? It's not like they provide disclaimers on things like, caution, this requires above average reading comprehension. Though perhaps they should. That would keep the chuds out of my beloved franchises. The reality is, we often don't know. Sometimes we consume something and realize that it's a lot more complex than we initially thought. And sometimes we don't realize that. There's little we can do here. How could you know the complexity of everything before you go into it? Isn't that also part of the fun? Wondering not just if, but how your fancy will be tickled? In cases where we can tell that something is more than meets the eye, you should know what to do by now. But there's the rub. While complexity is not causal to perceived quality, many of the things that are considered the best are also complex. Thus, we rush into them without the foundational skills and come out on the other side with an incomplete understanding. An example of the sort of complexity I'm talking about is when the thing interacts with the genre it takes place in. For example, satire, parody, and deconstruction. You could still very likely extract enjoyment and or learning from these things without directly interacting with the metacommentary, but all I'm saying is that in the case of you deliberately choosing to consume these things with the knowledge that they make commentary on a certain genre, it would be prudent to possess at least a decent understanding of that genre. After all, you can't comprehend the deconstruction of a genre without first the construction of the genre. You wouldn't feed a toddler a pudding. You know, like the title of this section that I showed before, and like pudding is the metaphor for something that you consume later after the meal, so that you can because you won't appreciate it without the contextualization of the meal. Um, and I'm not talking a snack pack, or I'm talking like a fancy ass flan, or like black pudding. Oh no, that's more like a sausage though. Has the food stuff gotten old yet? I hope not. I've already tried to explain the value of consuming media of all different qualities for the sake of intellectual appreciation. But what if you're not concerned with intellectual appreciation? What if you just want to be entertained? Extremely accessible entertainment, the kind we often say we turn our brains off when consuming, is not bad every so often. I'm certainly not advocating for its abolition. But this is essentially junk food for our brains, and for the sake of aspiring to a balanced media diet, it should only be consumed in moderation. That is, alongside other more thought-provoking things. Hold the phone! Did you hear what he just said? Thought-provoking? I thought you could extract value from any sort of thing. Isn't he being a little contradictory here? Okay, that's my bad. I'll try to speak plainly for a bit. While I maintain that you can find meaning in any sort of thing, there's no denying that some things are explicitly made to not be thought too deeply about. You could ponder about Subway Surfer's depiction of artists being delinquent and unfit for society, or perhaps about how Too Hot to Handle frames physical intimacy as less valuable than other forms of intimacy. But this is what I'd like to call beating a dead author. So much for speaking plainly. I don't think the vast majority of Subway Surfers players and Too Hot to Handle viewers are thinking about this sort of thing. Not because they can't, but because it's so much easier to consume those things without exercising that much thought. Like gobbling a glizzy widthwise. It's not that you can't, it's just easier to eat it lengthwise. But screw conventions, am I right? I love beating dead authors, and you can quote me on that. We often depend on people to recommend us new things, whether they're friends who have similar preference to us or some random schmuck in a meandering video essay. And usually, these recommendations aren't neutral. Nobody says, "You should play this video game. It's neither good nor bad." They say, "A life without Dark Souls 2 is a life wasted," or "This game is a bunch of poopy ass dicks." While other people's opinions on things can certainly prepare us for what's to come, it's important that we don't favor their opinions over our own. What I mean is, there is a difference between liking something because it's good and liking something because you've been told that it's good. If your friend recommends something to you, you might feel an obligation to like it, because they like it and you don't want to upset them by disagreeing. This is understandable, but when we think like this, we deprive ourselves and others of the opportunity to explore the differences in our opinions. There is a time and a place, of course. It would be sociopathic to try and debate with your 4-year-old cousin about the infantile dialogue and stiff acting in Dora the Explorer. But I know this is a tall order, for us to be more mature about the things we like and or engage with, and to be more confident in our own opinions. If we let others determine our opinions on things, we put ourselves at risk of creating echo chambers which, while not always harmful, are at the very least unproductive. But how do we form a valid opinion on something when we don't have a foundation to base our opinion on? One day, I found I had entirely too much free time, so I decided of my own volition to watch Joel Schumacher's 2004 cinematic adaptation of Andrew Lloyd Webber's 1986 musical adaptation of Gaston Leroux's 1909 novel, The Phantom of the Opera. Now, I can tell you that it's a good musical, or a good movie version of a musical version of a novel, but given the limited catalog of musicals stored in my memory, I don't feel equipped to effectively explain why The Phantom of the Opera is so good. But that's not going to stop me from telling you that I think The Phantom of the Opera is literally so goated. I don't like it because someone told me it's good, but I also don't like it because I know exactly what it is that makes it good. Am I able to call it good then? Let people enjoy things! I hear you clawing at your screens. And yet, that's exactly what I'm advocating for. I'm not saying that you need a deep understanding of any given genre before you're permitted to appreciate or identify with works within that genre. I'm saying that in the spirit of casual intellectualism, we should strive to develop our understanding of things so that we might be able to locate what it is about certain things that we like. Do we need to always know why we enjoy things? Probably not. But certainly a degree of intellectual discussion is predicated on an understanding of the material being discussed. I'm kind of sick of the whole food metaphor, so I'm hopeful that you understand what I'm saying. If you're going to take anything away from this video, it should be that you should consume media that you find interesting, not because of some arbitrary attribution of quality. You owe it to yourself to take your time before rushing into things that you might not yet be able to fully appreciate. And you are smarter than you give yourself credit for. Thank you for watching.